many of you watched before. We'll touch on a little bit with this, but active transportation really is a lot of inclusivity, all planning for all modes. Unfortunately for everybody on the window side over here, I'm going to be kind of hiding around the corner. I have to be able to see this monitor. We have some smaller things for me to click on that I couldn't see from over there very well. So this map is from our bike ped plan, and I'm not going to really use the map the whole time, but I do want everybody to be able to see what we're talking about in some of these locations around town. I'm a map guy. I can really get into it, see it, and memorize it pretty well, but not everybody works the same way. So I'll try to use the map to illustrate some of the things we're talking about. I'm going to turn it over to Wood Hudson now and just let everybody introduce themselves.
Thanks, Phil. So I'm Wood Hudson. I am I'm half of the new State Trails office. I am been on the job now for about 3 months. I'm located at VDOT, specifically in the Transportation and Mobility Planning section. I have a colleague, Torsha Bhattacharya, that is in the Local Assistance Program that makes up the other half of our office. The State Trails office was formed by the 2022 General Assembly budget negotiation process. We've recently staffed up and are working towards some of the items that were set out in our kind of charge. First off is developing a statewide trails plan, a clearinghouse to go with that, and then we are actively collaborating with our state partners at DCR and the State Trails Advisory Committee, as well as all sorts of other groups, including we just had a call with the Virginia Department of Health today. So we're really working on kind of building a large coalition around trails and state trails. A little bit about me. As I mentioned, been in this job now for 3 weeks. I came to this position from the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, where I spent about 4 or 5 years really focused on multimodal transportation, rural transportation, technological innovation, and statewide transit planning. Before that, I worked in Charlottesville and Washington, D.C. on the regional government level, doing everything from transportation to natural resource management. I'm going to pass things over to Kat.
Great. Thank you, Wood. My name's Kat Anthony. I'm the Executive Director of the Virginia Capitol Trail Foundation. First off, who's been on the Cap Trail? Raise your hand. If you're not raising your hand, you have homework to do, all right? So the Capitol Trail, just so everyone knows, is a 52-mile trail that goes from Richmond, the floodwall doors, all the way to Williamsburg, so the Jamestown settlement. It's a fully paved, multi-use trail. Our foundation was started to make sure the trail got built. Once it got built, our mission shifted, and so we're here to make sure the Capitol Trail is enhanced, promoted, and then of course we want to make sure those connector trails are built. So we are a small team, a team of 5. When I first started as a staff of 2, so I'm growing my monarchy, it's great. And so, so the ways that we do that is we promote the trail. We use social media, we use websites. We had our Cap to Cap bike ride this past weekend, which was awesome. We had 1,300 riders, which was great. We have a run in the fall at Stone Brewing, October 28th. We launched our summer challenge actually today. So if you want to complete the Cap Trail, you actually get to win a medal, which is pretty cool. First time we've had medals. It's only $25 to sign up. We also do amenities along the trail, so benches, rain shelters, all that good stuff. And then we also program the trail. I have a skate clinic in 2 weeks that I'm attending. Black Girls Do Bike has a great ride this weekend that we're excited to be at. We do a lot of different programs, which we enjoy, and a lot of community engagement with the stakeholders around the trail. We also are excited about connector trails, and so small connections to schools and communities, and then bigger trails, things like the Fall Line or the Birthplace of America Trail or the 3 Notch Trail. If you don't know any of those, they're all really big regional trails, which we're excited about. My background is I started out in kind of outdoor recreation, so I loved rock climbing and being in the outdoors, and then through that I learned nonprofit management. So I learned fundraising. I worked at Sportable before this in Paralympic sports. I was really sad to miss the lunch earlier with Matthew, who was speaking. I know he's a great speaker. And then now I'm working at the CAP Trail, and it's been really fun. So thank you.
I'm Barb Smith, and I work for Chesterfield County in the Transportation Department. I'm an engineer program manager, so I help deliver projects in the county. And I've been working over 30 years. I started with VDOT, so 10 years with VDOT, and then 20 years with the county. And it's just been really amazing to see the evolution and the change in focus from Chesterfield being really a suburban car-centric county to wanting to make it bikeable and walkable. So that's been really fun to watch and be a part of.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sharon Smidler. I work in the Henrico County Department of Public Works for about 18 years. I'm the Transportation Development Director for about 4 years now. And multimodal transportation is very important to me and the county. And I've seen a lot of progress we've made over the years. We're doing a lot of roadway reconfigurations in Henrico where the traffic volumes can accommodate it, accommodating bike lanes, taking 4-lane undivided roadways, putting in a center turn lane and bike lanes in each direction, and gathering public feedback. And really excited about the Fall Line Trail coming through and building some connector trails. We just had a public meeting for part of the Henrico segment at Lewis Ginter on May 16th. And today's the last day for comments if anybody is interested in submitting. Yeah, so happy to be here and talk some more about multimodal. And and transit is great too. GRTC has 0 fares, and I see ride finders out here. So there are many opportunities for multimodal.
Thank you. I was going to say Sharon and Barbara are also on our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee. They've been very participatory in a lot of the Plan RVA efforts. Kat was on our steering committee for our bike ped plan. We've had many of you in the room help participate in that planning effort. Again, this map that I'm showing is one of the results of that, and I did want to kind of go over briefly. As Sharon was talking about in Chesterfield and the city, there's been a lot of I guess it's lower hanging fruit, but when you go to repave a road and you've done the traffic studies, you see that there is an opportunity to it's not heavily trafficked. Maybe you can, as it's being repaved, restripe it. So there's a lot of those types of roadways in the region that have been converted to bike lanes. That's the easier ones. There's some more difficult ones, like where you really have to put some money into it to build a separated bike lane or bike facility. And on this map, I know it's really kind of hard to see a lot of these. I just really wanted to make sure everybody got a good representation. Obviously this is the entire region. For the bike ped plan, we worked with all 9 localities, and that includes the town of Ashland. Trying to how do each of these localities interact with each other? With roads, gosh, all the roads connect everywhere, right? But with bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, trying to make sure that at the boundary with Henrico County going into the city, that there's priority corridors, that this bike lane is going to connect with the next bike lane, that the Fall Line, which is obviously 7 different localities, connects with each locality at the boundary. They hand it off to the next one smoothly, and that the trail is consistent. But in that planning effort we had for the bike ped plan, which I have to say, it's been a year since we had that. We finished the work and it was adopted by our board. So May 2022 was when that was adopted. It took a long time. Like I said, we had a steering committee. We went through many different topics, through that. And again, it replaced the 2004 bike ped plan, which that's a long time to go in between planning efforts. But really, it did take us. We worked through the pandemic mostly, so it was a lot of online efforts with that. But I did want to touch on a few things that again, this is kind of following up from the previous session on inclusivity. Our guiding principles for the bike ped plan were provide a safe, multimodal regional transportation system. That sounds pretty clear. I mean, we can't just focus on one area. It's how they all interact. build equity, to ensure choice among all travel options. And, obviously with active transportation, that's, very inclusive, encompassing, I should say. Prioritize completion of regional bicycle and pedestrian networks, make last mile transit access a priority. This kind of following up what Sharon's saying is, connecting to those, bus and transit options, both before you get on the bus and then after you arrive at your destination. And then last, incorporate context sensitive design. What you see as a bike lane in one locality might be different from another, but that we try to have them be, as consistent as we can, as safe as we can, and so on. We got into it, and we had this conversation again. We're working with Ashland on their bicycle and pedestrian plan now, but the terms bicycle and pedestrian are synonymous with active transportation. That includes people who walk, bike, roll, scoot, or use another human-powered or assisted mobility device. So really, we're talking about trying to make it safe for everyone who's basically not driving a car, all modes. And so, bike ped doesn't quite cover it. We thought active transportation was the right term to use in that situation. But we're trying to be intentional, with all modes of transportation with this. So in the planning efforts, the city already had a bicycle master plan. So, we tried to, incorporate their planning. Chesterfield, thank goodness, Barbara and them in Chesterfield had the Bikeways and Trails chapter of their comprehensive plan. Hanover added a active and healthy living chapter of their comprehensive plan. And they're actually going through that process now to update that. And then Henrico right now is working on their bicycle draft plan. So again, trying to incorporate all of those plans into our regional planning efforts. And then, I keep picking on Emmy, but I'm happy to see her face. Ashland right now is working on their bicycle and pedestrian plan. The other localities, again, we worked with Goochland, Powhatan, New Kent, Charles City. How do we best incorporate all of their planning efforts? Charles City has a huge amount of trail because of the Capitol Trail. But how does that incorporate with the rest of the region, right? So, well, anyway, we've gone through all of those. I was going to say, does anyone have anything else to add?
Oh, I'd just add, Phil, Plan RVA has been super helpful. We had an active transportation work group that all the localities most of the localities participated in, and it helped us brainstorm and talk about connections. And I appreciate Plan RVA help facilitating that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and I'm very happy to participate with anybody's planning efforts. I know in Chesterfield, I've knocked on the door a few times with, Barbara was including me on some smart scale application efforts not long ago. So I'm very much still learning my position as well and how I can help. I did want to show, these are the existing bike lanes, bike infrastructure around the region, trails. We have 144 completed miles in the area, in the region. And then there's 645 proposed miles. So we got a long way to go if we are ever to, try to complete those. That includes Capitol Trail, obviously, which is, 52 miles. Does not include the 43-mile fall line, but it will. That is in the proposed. And again, fall line would connect Ashland to Petersburg. And I'm going to try to, this is why I sat on this side so I can see this map a little bit better. Try to cut on fall line here. Oh, I know what I did wrong. There it is. So
And that long line is the Capitol Trail, just so you
yeah,
know.
the
That
blue
long-
line.
I had to say it.
So
That
blue line
long
over
blue
here.
line
Blue line over here
the
is the Capitol
Capitol
Trail.
Trail. Just want to make sure everyone knew.
I accidentally cut fall line off, but the green line running straight through the center is the East Coast Greenway, which right now is on road for the most part through the entire area. There it is. I cut fall line off. So I'm going to cut East Coast Greenway off because it kind of clutters. You can see this dotted blue line, kind of running between Ashland and Petersburg. Like I said, that's 43-mile trail, proposed trail. We're working on all the funding and all the different things to make it happen. VDOT completed a study in February 2020. So we've been working off of that, from that time frame. Again, the idea with Fall Line, similar to Capitol Trail. I mean, I won't step on cat's toes, but obviously a great precedent set with Capitol Trail. But the connections for Fall Line, we've got two major regional trails, obviously the Capitol Trail, and then can't see it as well down, but Appomattox Regional Trail, again, we'll be able to connect in the Colonial Heights, South Chesterfield, Petersburg, Hopewell, all those localities connecting with the Appomattox Regional Trail system as well. 3 river crossings, obviously the Chickahominy, James, and the Appomattox. There's 24 public schools in that corridor for Fall Line. So, trying to, allow people to use active transportation to get to school if we can. 4 colleges and universities, including Randolph-Macon, Virginia Union, VCU, and Virginia State. 2 community colleges, Bright Point and Reynolds. Obviously, the connections to transit, and then there's several parks and community assets along the way. There's even some new parks in South Richmond that we're developing right now that would, hopefully we'll have nice spur trails to Fall Line, so people can get to the park by biking and walking versus having to be driven there. So lots of different ways. That includes the James River Park system as well. And we're going to be, if you guys all looked out that window, Fall Line's going to go across the Manchester Bridge, right in the heart of the city. So a lot of different ways that we can connect with the river and park systems and so on. I think we're going to talk about Fall Line for a little bit here. I was going to say, would you like to take it from here?
Sure. So what maybe I can ask you to do is bring up on the map, you have like a layer, I think, that is more focused on the proposed. Because I think a good thing to start the conversation is you mentioned there's 144 completed miles and there's like 645 odd planned miles. How do we get from planned to implemented? And how do we, continue to like build on the momentum that we've kind of created with things like the Capital to Capitol Trail? I think this is a really wide question. I think we can go the route of advocacy and marketing to planning. One thing that I think I'm selfishly interested in learning is what sort of resources are needed on the local and regional level to really truly move the needle on building miles of trail. So I think the first question I'm going to throw out to everybody is kind of the implementation, going from planning to implementation, and how we can do that on a regional level.
I'm happy to jump in there. Like I said earlier, just the evolution that I've seen in Chesterfield, through the years. Initially, when I came, the first step was getting developers to build sidewalk with projects. We were building subdivisions with no sidewalk, and commercial developments, no sidewalk. So then we did that. And then VDOT had the policy for bike and ped consideration with road projects. And so we had to include those facilities with road projects. Now we've got the bikeways and trails plan in the county. Our comp plan references bikeable, walkable. So we're in the implementation phase. And the real challenge for us has been getting meaningful funding for projects. Most of the sidewalk or trail money that's available it's very small scope. We don't have funding sources that allow us to do bigger projects. For instance, on Route 60, where we've got some local transit service and we're planning on expanding, we need sidewalk up and down Route 60. We're having pedestrian crashes, but we can't get that project funded. We've tried all sorts we've submitted applications for many years, different funding sources, and just can't get that funded. I'm encouraged by the new Safe Streets for All program that's come through with the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. It sounds like that grant program, once we have our action plan, you have to have an action plan in place first. But once you have an action plan, it seems like that might be a really good source for some meaningful pots of money where we can really make an impact on completing networks and making things safer for folks.
Well said, Barb. I know Henrico had the same thing, trying to get with plan of developments or subdivisions, trying to get the developer to install sidewalk along the property frontage. And then we've been coming in and trying to install missing gaps of sidewalks. And then we have our draft bike plan that Phil referenced. And so we've been using that when PODs, plan of developments or subdivisions come in, and trying to coordinate with developers and having, even though it is draft, it was out for public comment, and trying to get them to incorporate that. Henrico did receive a Safe Streets for All Action Plan grant, so we're coordinating with FHWA, trying to get that agreement implemented, and I think that will help us prioritize and hopefully help us gain funding for more of these projects for trails.
And I come from it from a more grassroots community advocacy way. And so, and I'm also, I should also say that I'm also the president of the Virginia Trails Alliance. And so we advocate for things like the Office of Trails, funding for trails. And so I think like we always need more money. And so making sure citizens are advocating and saying, yes, I want this. I want this in my neighborhood. Make this a priority. That's kind of how the fall line came. One of the ways is that people wanted it, and there is this energy, and then leaders said, I want this, and then, not saying magically, but a lot of money started coming through. And so I think that's really important to make sure that, that the citizens and people know how to advocate. So talking to their legislators, their board of supervisors, their city council saying, yes, I want this. And I know I get a lot of calls from other trail groups saying, how can I get this Capitol Trail where I live? I have a concept, how do I make it work? And I'm excited about the Office of Trails having like a toolbox or something so people who want to get a trail built can understand ways of doing it that are approachable. So that would be my way of getting a trail built in some ways.
Yeah, I was going to add a little bit something there too. So I've been in my position since 2016. There was not a bicycle and pedestrian coordinator specifically, tasked with that in this office before that. I'm very fortunate though, that at the same time that I got this job, a lot of the localities were also picking up and doing a lot more active transportation planning. I feel like I'm kind of riding the wave versus, helping get it started. It's very, I'm in a lucky position. Kat, with her success with the Capitol Trail, and then setting the precedence, like, wow, this is an awesome trail. We can really get places. This is a fun place to ride, creating more riders, that sort of thing. But again, as Barbara was talking about with Chesterfield, like, yeah, when you have sidewalks to nowhere, that doesn't really work, but it's filling in the gaps between, in Chesterfield, Henrico, the city, a lot of the localities have taken that on of how do we complete sidewalk networks, or how do we connect one trail to the next? And again, with Fall Line, it's going to be a lot of different segments that are done at different times, and how do we get between each of those as it's being developed? We talked about the Capitol Trail. The plan originally was for it to just go, all right, let's go straight from James City County to Richmond, march all the way, and it kind of happened in different segments.
Yeah, purposely, actually. So at first they were like, we can just build it slowly straight, right? But actually they purposely put gaps in the middle so that at the end, someone said, oh, we're done funding that Capitol Trail. It's only 20 miles, it's good, right? But if there's a couple gaps, you could say, well, we got to connect that, And so it was purposely done that way. So I think a few gaps at the beginning is actually not a bad thing, but making sure you keep the momentum and saying, well, we need to connect this. So that was done actually purposely behind the scenes.
Yeah, our applications are always better when we can say we're filling in a gap.
Yes.
Yeah, got a lot more chance for success.
Well, and you mentioned too the safety aspect. I mean, we have data that we collected for this planning project that shows like where a lot of the crashes are. That Route 60 corridor you talked about, there's so many more incidences along that corridor. It's trying to make sure that you're highlighting the areas, or planning for improvements along those areas that are the worst for safety.
Hey, Phil, can I go off of something you said, sidewalks to nowhere?
Yes.
So in my long career, initially we were building sidewalks and we'd get criticized about, you just built this sidewalk, it goes nowhere. But now we have enough that we're making meaningful connections. But we're sort of at the beginning with our trails, you know? So we just had a road widening project where we built a trail. And the folks in that community are like, why'd you build this trail? It goes nowhere, you know? And you have to be able to kind of deal with that. And it's unfortunate, but you know, government goes kind of slow. And you just have to reassure people that, you know, we've got this plan and it'll come together. I've seen it happen in my career. It'll come together, just be patient. Yeah.
I know the Capitol Trail, you know, started in James City County, took 10 years with the shovel in. That took 10 years to get built. And Culls Courthouse Grill, if y'all haven't been there, it's a great restaurant along the trail in Charles City County Courthouse. Charles City County has 27 miles of the Capitol Trail. It's a rural community, about 7,000 or 8,000 people, has a Chickahominy tribe. It's a wonderful county. And Cullen, so at first, you know, I went to the trail, went to that restaurant, it's a wonderful trail or restaurant. And then once the trail was built, the restaurant revenue went up 300% once it was built. And so I think that's a great testament to saying people will come and it will change the economic impact of the surrounding businesses. And yeah, I could talk about economic impact of trails.
There's less than 8,000 people living in Charles City County.
Yeah.
And they're not really gathered up. It's just sparsely.
Beautiful properties.
yeah.
Beautiful properties. Yeah.
But yes, many people who have biked the Capitol Trail have ended up at Culls, and you know, but the idea again with the Fall Line corridor is a very densely populated center. So, and again, we're going to get into Fall Line a little bit. I wanted to make sure I'm not stepping on Woods moderating here.
You're doing a good job.
Co-moderator or something.
So kind of what I wanted to do is maybe continue on something that you had just mentioned, kind of the economic impact and the value of trails and how we can do a better job telling that story. You know, we are kind of in this era of really data-driven planning and data-driven decision-making. And I know you all have done some pretty good work around the Capitol Trail and demonstrating some of the economic returns. You know, how can that data be leveraged for other people that are looking at similar projects or doing similar kind of, or early on in similar efforts?
Well, we have an economic impact study on the Capitol Trails website, so use it. I want to make sure everyone has that data. It shows that real estate values of homes went up 3 to 4% once the Capitol Trail was built. It showed 8 to 9 million of revenue or income coming in. Actually, the economic impact study was good. Didn't show the construction and how the economic impact of jobs came from that as well. So trails mean business. So I've been at the Capitol Trail for 5.5 years. There has been restaurants show up, bike shops built. You know, Charles City County talked about having a food tax because of all the revenue coming in from out-of-towners. Brings in tourism. It's super, super important. It's also important to have counter data. So we work with VDOT on counters. And so counters are ways of figuring out how many people or how many users are using the trail. So we average about 1 million trail counts a year. So that's about on average. During COVID, we had about 1.2, and now we're about 1 million. So it's really important to show trails mean business. I do think it's really important with the Fall Line to talk about gentrification also, and how will that impact once the trail is built, and thinking about things like affordable housing, making sure community engagement is high on the list. And so I love showing a shiny, beautiful trail. I think it's also really important to think about community engagement and how that impacts the communities. And I know that work is being done, but it's nice to have a platform to make sure it's reminded. So.
Anybody else want to add anything to that? I also wanted to mention that we want to keep this kind of casual, so audience members, if you have a question, feel free to raise your hand or just kind of jump in and engage the panel.
From Henrico's perspective, we have the Green City development that's proposed near Parham and 95. And so we're looking at a connector trail from the Fall Line and have that very preliminary under design, and that's definitely a selling point for those developers and us, because again, it leads to active transportation and multimodal. If we had all cars going in there, yeah, we would still account for it, but it's just better to be multimodal, and we're looking at a connector trail there.
Yeah, and as far as Chesterfield goes, something I can relate to is our planning department developed the Northern Jeff Davis Special Area Plan before Fall Line was even being discussed. And it had the trails and sidewalks built into it with the idea of revitalizing that corridor. So they saw that, ahead of Fall Line Trail, and having the Fall Line Trail backing that plan up, I think is going to help us see that become a reality on the corridor.
I was going to say in the city, I saw the other day an article on Richmond BizSense. It was talking about city center, replacing the Coliseum. And again, Fall Line is supposed to go right through that corridor on 7th Street through connecting into Jackson Ward. But they've got a trailhead already planned within that development. So that's just one area. But again, trying to answer the gentrification issue, like how are we going to make sure that everybody along that corridor gets to keep their houses, that they're not displaced, through new redevelopment and so on. It doesn't really count with the city center necessarily, but all the areas around there through Jackson Ward North and obviously through Southside. We talked a lot about, when we talked about Fall Line, that corridor in South Richmond between, really Commerce Road just south of here down to connect with Chesterfield is an area that has not had a lot of sidewalk trail infrastructure, connections to transit, things that may have been promised to them when the property was annexed, when that part of Chesterfield was annexed in the 70s. So trying to hopefully with Fall Line provide some connections. It's not just for recreation. That's a transportation option for people, a safer way to get to that bus, to the store, to a park, whatever it might be, to a school.
To their job.
Yeah. And so again, in that particular area, we're hoping that that Fall Line would help provide that connection where it hadn't been available at all. I mean, imagining if you've been up and down Route 1, it's just a bunch of, in a lot of areas, a bunch of driveways, for businesses and different things. So not a safe place to walk if that's your only option. So, hopefully with Fall Line, we will have a separated space that people are able to get through between Ashland and Petersburg, but really more for those shorter segments. It's not just that through 43-mile ride or walk. It's that connection, for that 1/2 mile that might be, safer for each person.
And the crossings.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so.
Certainly with Fall Line Trail or any trail or sidewalk system, making sure that you have safe pedestrian signalized crossings at regular intervals. Something again in Chesterfield that we're lacking. My evolution, I was like, okay, I'm okay with people walking like this on the road, but I don't want them crossing this 45-mile-per-hour road with all these cars on it. It's just too scary. And but now VDOT has really gotten behind putting in signalized pedestrian crossings. So whenever they're upgrading signals, they automatically include that infrastructure. And we're doing it with all of our road projects, and we've got standalone projects that are specific for pedestrian signals. So yeah, it's just really the momentum is great.
That oftentimes goes hand in hand with transit and improving transit facilities, because transit is a not insignificant generator of pedestrian activity. And we all know that we can probably name and shame some pretty terrible bus stops in all of our localities.
Yes, and so I'm glad you mentioned transit, because GRTC is initiating a north-south BRT, bus rapid transit, that we're coordinating with the localities. The stakeholder meetings have just kicked off, And I think that's a great alternative if, or connections to the Fall Line Trail, but provides opportunity for all to head further north on a shorter time schedule. And yes, we're trying to fill in gaps so when people get off at the transit stop, they can get safely and that they have the ped crossings. And Henrico took GRTC up on their offer, and we rode the GRTC bus, my team and I, with Adrian Torres, their CEO, and a few of their others. And just because we're designing plans and have these plans, and a lot of us haven't really ridden the bus that much. So I encourage you to reach out to GRTC and ride the bus. I mean, we got on the Route 19 on Broad Street. There were no ped signals out there. Got our team dodging cars to get over there. And but it was interesting to ride the Pulse ride the 19 to Willow Lawn, get on the Pulse, get some lunch downtown. But then it started raining. We have no shelter. And, we're trying to time it just right. And GRTC has their app. But it was more eye-opening to see that. And I encourage others who are, working on to reach out to GRTC, ride the bus. It is zero fare. And I think that really helped us with the design. And then we networked with GRTC staff and can reach out to them. And Henrico did receive some federal grant funding to have shelters installed. So we're coordinating with GRTC, and we're going through a prioritization with shelters, benches.
Yeah, I'll spin off of that with GRTC and give them a shout out because they are, they've developed an amenities plan. I think they call it an infrastructure plan, where they've looked at all of their stops system-wide and determined deficiencies, and then prioritized how they're going to tackle resolving those deficiencies, with concrete landing pads for folks, benches, trash cans, shelters, depending on ridership. So they really have put a focus on putting bus infrastructure in place system-wide. And I think they were successful through the TPO and getting some CMAQ money to knock out a bunch of that. So they're really stepping up to the plate and trying to make things better for the riders as well.
I was going to say with the map, I did, can't really see it as well, but that light blue that's kind of mixed in there, that's the bus routes. I'm pretty sure that's up to date. It might be a couple of things that are changed, but a lot of the bike and we don't have sidewalk highlighted, but obviously trying to connect along those same corridors because truly people do bike. You get to the bus stop by bike, perhaps, so you take that bike with you, and then you might at the end of your ride, your bus ride, take that bike and finish it. We have some people who work here that do that. I think there's a few people in our audience who did come by bus today as well. So again, just trying to make sure that the bus system does interact well with our active transportation network, and continuing to prioritize those corridors as we continue to develop.
And Phil, I know, so the GRTC buses have some 2 bike racks on the front, and there's a video on their webpage, like if you want to watch how to do it, load it up.
And also we should think about the Amtrak as well, being accessible to the Fall Line. For the Cap Trail, there's 17th Street, Main Street, which has Amtrak. It's just a bike lane away to the Cap Trail. At the Jamestown end, there's actually a bus that goes from the trailhead to Amtrak in Williamsburg. So also thinking about that, we have many people who will use it to do the entire trail. So ride one way, take the Amtrak back. But I have also heard many people from DC, Maryland, North Carolina come, ride the trail, and then go home, even as far away as Florida or other places. So, and then people will fly to Richmond to use the Capitol Trail. So thinking about transit when it comes to Richmond Airport as well, and how it connects to the Fall Line Cap Trail.
I've had somebody in this room floated the idea of Ettrick, taking the train between Ettrick and Ashland, doing the trail and doing it that way as well. We can't do that yet with BRT, but that really is the similar corridor, north-south, following somewhat along that same Fall Line corridor. So it's not out of the realm of possibility between those two. And the train line does kind of, you know, complete that similar corridor. But yeah, that's, again, you know, how do you survive in society without a car? You know, it can be done. So
I think there's a question.
let me come to you with the microphone, please. That's kind of why I have it.
Sorry, in the spirit of keeping things casual, was it okay to interrupt
Yeah,
with the question? So either I'm really ignorant or just really curious about land acquisition to put these trails on. Is it all county or city property, which is why it's next to roads? Or do you acquire private property or do you lease it? And then another question I have, which is 143 miles and or the Capitol Trail being what? How many miles?
52 miles.
Okay. Are there pavilions, restrooms, anything like that along the Capitol Trail?
Mhm.
And are things planned like that?
Question.
Just curiosity.
You want to take the land question?
Yeah, I'll talk about the land part. So yeah, with our projects where we're building new sidewalk trail, we have to acquire property in most cases. We don't normally have enough right of way to fit it in. So that's why these projects end up costing so much money. We're knocking on individual property owners' doors and negotiating to acquire the right of way. Sometimes we'll get an easement, but you know, it's still same cost one way or the other. Yeah.
And Henrico's doing the same thing with like the Fall Line Trail. Some of it's planned to be in Dominion, Virginia Power's easement, and we're coordinating with them. But there are other portions where we're trying to follow like an existing sewer easement, but we still need to get permission from those property owners. And we're still under design, but the next phase is right of way. We've already started right of way on our first segment leaving the city, like Park Street, where we've started right of way, and it's negotiations and yeah, it takes some time.
And then the Capitol Trail, so it's 52 miles. So there are some bathrooms, some water stops. We are in charge of putting in shade, water, bike repair stations, benches. Shout out to Henrico County. They're installing bathrooms at 4 Mile Creek, which is really exciting.
Under construction.
Under construction. So we're very excited about that. We also pay for porta johns on the Capitol Trail where there are gaps. I wish I could tell you installing bathrooms and water is super inexpensive, but it's not. So where there are gaps, we do pay for that. And then we've got some great restaurants and places that are like, please come in, use it, you know, like, so it's been good in that way. Parking is always a big question. A lot of the parking, or much of the parking, was already there except for a few. Jamestown Settlement was parking, the Charles City Courthouse, Herring Creek. 4 Mile Creek was added, which was great because it connected, the bathrooms were needed, then also connects to Dory Park. Rachel Block Park was already there. So I think with parking, hopefully with Fall Line, we'll be thinking about what is already there and what can be reutilized. And then of course, some new trailheads are always going to be important. I would love for the Capitol Trail, every 10 to 12 miles, having shade, water, a place to sit. That's usually what people need.
And just, I can speak to the Fall Line Trail and what Henrico is doing with our designs. We are proposing 2 trailheads. We purchased the Bank of America building right near the city of Richmond. It's like Lakeside Avenue and Park Street. And so we're going to plan to use that as a trailhead. You know, it's already cleared. There's a building we'll have to retrofit or add some restrooms, but there's already parking there next to an existing county park, Spring Park. And we're looking at another trailhead kind of near Perriman Villa Park, but the specific streets, we purchased some property there, Cleveland and Athens, I think it is. And so, yeah, that's what we're doing.
Great job.
Restrooms and
Yeah,
and we're
great
looking
job.
at benches along the way and still coordinating with Dominion
Yeah.
about what's allowed in the right of way and trying to put them near trees so people can, well, not the Dominion right of way, but along our easements so people have some shade as well.
Yeah, I mean, Dominion does have some specific things. They don't like permanent structures within the corridor, things like that. But to that point, I mean, you know, in this area here, Sharon had mentioned earlier, connecting to the Green City development, Athens. This is if you guys can see the little where I'm circling with the mouse, Athens runs across. This is an old bridge here, Scott Road. The bridge, I guess, is being replaced, is being torn down right now.
It will be.
But the
Plan is
idea,
to tear it down. Yeah, it's been hit multiple times and it's
too
closed
low,
now.
too
It's
low
too
on
low.
95.
Yes.
But the idea to replace that with a pedestrian and cyclist structure. And then this is the old best,
Best
Products.
products.
yeah, best products headquarters. A lot of this area is being redeveloped as part of that Green City development. But the idea, hey, we've got this plan for Fall Line. Well, let's go ahead and have a spur trail to connect across. Sharon had mentioned earlier, a little further north. This is the Chickahominy River. This little, dark line through here. This is the River Mill development, a nice, residential community. Over here is Virginia Center Commons. So we don't have it showing on the map because I cut that layer off, and it'll take me too long to figure out how to cut it back on. But there's, a connecting trail across here, a spur trail really, that's already been built. And essentially that's going to connect Greenwood Park here, which is, a really big sports tourism hub, local sports, all kinds of teams and sports use it, but also the tourism side of it. But that trail will eventually connect between Greenwood over here to Virginia Center Commons, where there's more sports tourism underway, hotels, restaurants, and everything. So, but the concept that you could actually come into town, park, and then not really need your car anymore. You just, bike, walk between these things. It's there. I've already done it a lot. I use this area quite a bit myself. But my point is, we don't have Fall Line yet, but we have all these spur trails, all these connections planned. And to your answer, like some of that was acquired property. Some of it was, hey, you're developing River Mill. Can you please do this extended trail for us? So it's just making good use of that development time.
And like what? Go ahead.
Yes. I will bring it to you.
So just to bring a little bit of a regional flair to this, I just want to make it's more of a comment than a question, I guess. But when we think about, Barbara, to your point, the long game that we are playing here. So right where you were talking about with River Mill and coming across to Virginia Center Commons, if you go up the back way there was an old road. It's called Kings Acres that used to be the exit. It used to be the Atlee Elmont exit, and some years ago that was redone when they built Sliding Hill Road. Had they at the time incorporated some sort of bike lane or sidewalk along most of that road when they did it, it would have connected up to what eventually became a multifamily apartment complex on the corner there. We could have had the developer put in the sidewalk there. And then when Hanover County's phase 3 of Atlee Station Road widening, which will include pedestrian and bike facilities along there, you would have not only been able to have a great spur from the Fall Line that serves Henrico, but you would have been able to do it and serve everybody living along the Atlee Station corridor in Hanover County, which then connects through to another one of the national bike trails along. So really, we have to think about these things in advance. We've got to get around the idea that, oh, well, that kind of goes through maybe a rural area. We don't really need that. No, we've got to think big picture because it will eventually serve multiple jurisdictions. And so now what we are faced with in Hanover is how do we try to build that connection between Atlee Station Road and Virginia Center Commons to get people through. So, but we'll likely end up having to try to acquire that's right. No, everything's light of day, sunshine. It's very good. But we'll have to try to get that from private folks, and then because we can't build, in the right of way. And just when you talk about acquisition and cost of sidewalks, believe you me, it's not even just the land cost. Sometimes it's building to the standards that we require. When you have to build an ADA compliant sidewalk, we're doing what, less than an eighth of a mile on school property, $250,000.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, thank you.
Yes.
I think all of this is really cool, and kudos to all of you for the work that you're doing. I'm local, so how do we stack up against other regions in Virginia or even other states, like with our new state trails office? Like, it seems really cutting edge and innovative to me, but how do we compare?
Well,
We're doing okay. We're doing okay. I mean, what do you think, Wood? Yeah.
I would say if you were to, rate us on a continuum, we would fall smack dab in the middle of average.
Yeah, I've seen C.
There are some states that are doing much more when it comes to statewide trails, and there are states that are doing less. I think there is a realization that we need to do some high-level planning, and that's kind of why the impetus for creating this office is to kind of do that and really focus in on how do we build connections, across regions. We've been really good at, honestly, kind of, when opportunity arises, building pieces through things like roadway resurfacing or new connections, or having a greenfield development include trail amenities. But building the longer sections, we have some examples. In Northern Virginia, they got the W&O&D, which is a really, really nice facility that goes basically from the Potomac River to past Dulles Airport. So there are other regions that have long linear facilities, but the potential to have an east-west and a north-south, I think, is a pretty huge benefit that the Richmond region can leverage in the future.
and it all comes back to evolution too. So a way to spin it is, Nova, if you compare us to
Yeah.
Nova, Nova's got a bunch of stuff and they look great. But, they're farther along
Mhm.
than we are here in Richmond. So we're getting there,
Mhm.
That's my positive spin.
There's been a lot of momentum. The CAP Trail was built fully in 2015. That big bike event was then, so that's something that helped with the momentum. The Office of Trails positions have been open for 3 months now, so things are kind of new. So with advocacy, with the Virginia Trails and CAP Trail, we advocated for this Office of Trails. And I looked at Florida, I looked at North Carolina, I looked at Ohio, I looked at Pennsylvania for ideas to see what other places are doing. So we're doing okay, but I do think the positive way of looking at it is we're going to keep going and get more and more and really get that regional trail network where you can bike, walk, or use transit to get from your house to work. Some people can, some people can't, or the grocery or to other places. So I think we're getting there. And a statewide trail map, I'm really excited about the Office of Trails doing and those things that we need to show those connections.
And our team at Henrico, we have weekly trail network team meetings. So whenever we go on vacations, each of our team members, we put a little nerdy. We go around taking pictures of trails or explore where we're on, things we like, take pictures, and then we give a PowerPoint presentation. Like this Friday, I think our director, he had gone to Indianapolis with sports backers to look at the cultural trail. And so he's bringing back and sharing with our team some of the things he learned there, what's working well, what's not working well, what we can do. And so that helps too.
Trying to learn from everybody else,
Yes.
just like we learned from Virginia Capitol Trail.
And I would offer, Henrico's team also went out with Kat, or one of your team members,
Yeah.
and rode the Capitol Trail. Just as we're working on the design of the Fall Line Trail, some of our team members hadn't ridden the Capitol Trail. So one of Kat's team members met us out there. We had our bikes and we rode portions of the Capitol Trail, stopped at 4 Mile. And it was interesting, looking at the 10-foot wide trail or just crossings, maybe what we do differently, or the separation from the roadway, the level of comfort with riding. So it just brought up some good discussions, and I'd encourage others, if you haven't rode, not to sign Kat up for more, but
Do a sign up sheet after this, all right? Yeah, field trips.
But that
We
was
want field
helpful.
trips.
I think I've got another question in the back here.
Hi, I really appreciate your work and appreciate the comment about creating gaps in terms of the impact on funding. And in that regard, I would strongly encourage, not only for the trails, but in all planning, to focus on intersections. Most crashes and involving pedestrians and cyclists occur at intersections. If you take the W&AD trail, what happened there is they built this great trail. It crossed a number of 4-lane roads. The first car will motion, oh, this is clear. Somebody gets impatient, swings around and kills
Yep.
a pedestrian or cyclist. And so in your thinking and planning, create the intersections that are safe at the start. It's harder to do, but the gaps to fill them in will be much more supported. So thank you.
Yeah, you raise a good point. I know with some of the sections we're looking at, like Dumbarton Road crossing or Hilliard Road crossing, you know, there are 4 lanes now. There has been shown the traffic volumes are lower enough. We can narrow the crossings with curb bump outs. And so there's less to cross. Look at overhead flashing beacons. We've done some test cases recently with thermoplastic pavement markings, just the reflectivity on our Public Works DPU yards, just testing out, seeing what looks best with the different combos, just to draw people's attention as far as the pavement markings as well.
Safety is super important, and keeping it consistent for the entire trail, because the
Yes.
cyclist or pedestrian will get confused as you're biking or walking it. So
Beacons do not work.
It's really,
So we're planning a pedestrian hybrid beacon on Route 1 to cross people, which stops traffic like a traffic signal.
There's some alternatives that are better, but as a general rule,
But like just flashing lights. Exactly. Yeah, people don't read speed limit signs. So yeah, they're not gonna.
Concerning planning, there's been a recent report that RVA Bike Share has folded up. And also, you know, there have been reports in the news about some of these electric scootering companies that have just sort of dumped, you know, their scooters around town, and it's kind of like, you know, shoot first and aim second. My question is, how do we as planners who, you know, typically have pretty long horizons when we're looking out to the future, incorporate these different forms of mobility that's kind of come and go, you know, and how do we account for that and you know, incorporate that into our planning?
I don't know if I have an answer for that.
it's not Henrico or Chesterfield yet. Yeah.
Yeah,
we haven't really been using the scooters.
yeah.
that we've done.
We aren't in the scooter business yet.
I was going to say that's mostly a city issue.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that particular case, you know, we're still looking at how do e-bikes incorporate on a trail, and
Yeah.
Kat, you might be able to address that a little bit. You know,
And so an e-bike, just so you know what it is. So e-bikes, there's type 1 all the way to type 4, but they have a little assist for you. Type 1, you can go up to 15 miles per hour, or was it 20 miles per hour, but they just kind of assist you. Type 2, there's a throttle. So it's not like a motorcycle, but it is a little throttle. And it can go up to 20 miles per hour. And then it goes all the way up to type 3, which is like up to 27 miles per hour maybe. And then 4 is really big. So we have a Capital Trail e-bike policy on the Capital Trail. We allow type 1 and type 2. We don't have really good enforcement, just to be transparent on that. It's really hard to figure out which e-bike is going by and catching them and all that. But they are great. If you go to Europe, they're everywhere. They are the way of the future. And so they're great for getting up the Cap Trail Hill. The scooters are wonderful for the last mile. Get off at the bus stop and you've got a mile or two to go. I also understand that I get really annoyed just seeing them flopped right in front of sidewalks and places where they need to be accessible. And bike share is also really successful in other places. So sorry to see that happened in the city. I guess I'm not a planner, but I would see how it's working in other cities, and because it is being successful would be my recommendation. I don't know, what do you have any other comments?
Yeah, there are some good models out there of local governments that have addressed some of the issues. I mean, in general, though, there is that fact that, the technology changes quickly, and as government, we are not the fastest beasts to evolve. So we are, oftentimes kind of chasing the evolution. You take things like short-term rentals and the sharing economy. It just takes a while for kind of the technology leaps in front of the regulation, and then the regulation kind of builds to catch up and not level the playing field, but establish kind of the norms. There are some really good models. Some municipal governments have really put a lot of thought into the way they've constructed their codes and ordinances around scooters, encourage scooter companies to do some behavior modification, through things like rewards. If you return your scooter to a certain geofenced location, it provides you with, some sort of monetary incentive off your next rental, versus if you leave it in a undesirable location, it costs you more. So, penalties plus incentivization has worked. But you do have to have there is the need to establish those guardrails, or else you get the situation where you see a scooter on the side of 64 that has just been abandoned, and nobody's touched it for 3 weeks.
And making sure it's equitably dispersed. It's not going to just be in the fan. It needs to be everywhere so that all people can utilize it, and putting that in the contract. I don't want to go into microtransit too much. We could talk a long time about it, but yeah.
Right, and to the question, the RVA bike share, when it shut down, they had some funding to expand that system and continue to grow it. So that's on hold. I'm not sure what the status is, but they're basically looking for a new contractor to help expedite all that. But yeah, those are all e-bikes. E-bikes are a great equalizer. So it's, you're creating more users, maybe taking one more car off the road. But not everybody can get up every hill in Richmond. So that just being able to use that little bit of assist to get up and down hills. I had another question over here.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the work that you all do. I just want to kind of touch in a little bit of a couple of things. And one is that, that you brought up the GRTC. So is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I live on Monument, so they stopped that route there. I live on the side of Henrico. So I find out that the GRTC was free. So I asked my wife, I said, hey, cool idea, let's go. We park there and we take the bus. There's a big sign there that it said, no parking for GRTC, specifically on Willow Lawn.
Yeah.
And it cost me like $30 that trip, by the way. Because then we go home, park the car, and then we walk to Willow Lawn, and we go to Short Pump on a 19 bus, I think it was.
Yes, 19 runs.
And so the bus is free. We got off at Best Buy, we bought a laptop, and then it was horrible. We ended up getting an Uber because we could not cross
Right.
Broad Street. So it was a nightmare experience. I used to do a workforce development consultant for the government. And when I looked at Richmond, I came here in year 2000, and when I looked at Richmond here, my biggest concern is this: corporate taking over. There's no parking. We growing, but I don't see if we growing with an ecosystem in mind. We don't come to Richmond. Right there's no public bathroom. In the canal walk here. So my wife, when we come here, we cannot bring bottle of water because we don't know where to use it. And if you drink this bottle of water 50 minutes later, you need to go to the bathroom. Where are you going to go? Go back to Brown Island there, and there's only like 5 there. And thinking, my other side of me said, why we cannot put something stable there, with portable water and everything, like when they close like the rest areas, they put one there that is like a container, and it has water, you can use it there. That's one of the things that I see. I read the Autism Travel Survey that indicate that 87% of the families do not travel because there's no accessibility for people with disabilities. And this is another concern that I see in Richmond. You know, because corporate has so much power, they can come and do everything. There's no president. I see in United States, I think there's no president, there's no legislation. I worked with Obama when he was a senator. I worked with Lindsey Graham when he was a presidential nominee. I understand how corporate, but you know, the concern is the people. We're taking out the people, the city people out. You know, and they're becoming poorer, and all we're thinking about money. So I do thank you so much for, you know, have that idea of making greener, because one of the things that I love, I always say, I travel all over the United States. And my second most beautiful city is Richmond. It's beautiful, has a lot of trees, has a lot of history, but what we're doing with it. Thank you.
I just, since I know you mentioned Willow Lawn, and we recognize the need for there, and we've been in the process of trying to negotiate with property owners and developers to get a park and ride, and the costs in Willow Lawn keep going up. And so we are still actively pursuing, trying to find a park and ride, coordinating with GRTC. We've done some studies. We're still looking, our county managers involved. We are working on it. Definitely recognize the need. And we are coordinating with VDOT with those PED crossings at Short Pump. It's true. I know they have one out, a PED crossing, Broad Street out by Cabela's and Wegmans out there, but sometimes just trying to cross the 6 lanes, that's intimidating. And we're working on it. Your concerns are very valid. Thank you for bringing them up.
I was going to say, I'm a frequent bike commuter. I ride my bike a lot, but yeah, it's very valid. Like, where do we go? You have to kind of have it mapped out in your head where you might, when you have a need to have a quick road stop. But crossing the road, yeah, I mean, I've biked, you know, crossing as a pedestrian is one thing, using the lights as a cyclist, you know, just basically being a vehicular cyclist, riding with the traffic, that can be very difficult as well. But yeah, knowing the ways to avoid those overdeveloped areas or places where there's a lot of difficult interactions with cars or potential for it. That part of my job, eventually I want to be able to have neighborhood byways, you know, recommendations for folks who are just trying to get from, you know, one place in town to another, but you don't go where you necessarily would go in a car. You wouldn't want to just ride down Patterson Ave, or sorry, yes, ride your bike down Patterson Avenue like you might drive down Patterson. You certainly wouldn't get on Midlothian Turnpike and just bike down Midlothian Turnpike. It's not recommendable. And the same with that Route 1 corridor, but you know, trying to have folks who may not be experienced cyclists or walker, but just, you know, trying to figure out that safest route to take to get, you know, that 3 miles, that 5 miles, whatever it is you're trying to do. So anyway, that's an ongoing effort on our end, but it's really important as you develop that network to, you know, again, close the gaps in the areas where it's most dangerous, and you know, direct people towards safer areas so that they know where they're going and they can find their way back to maybe a familiar place. So I was gonna say, we got about, you know, 15 minutes or so. We've got other questions we wanted to go over. I know we hadn't really gotten deep into Fall Line. I was going to say, we've kind of gone over a bunch of the things. I did want to add, yes, we have speaking of wayfinding, the CVTA, that's the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. We have a wayfinding effort. We are trying to make it to where when you are on Fall Line, that you can be directed to, you know, where your destination and the next destinations might be. We signed on with AB Design as the consulting firm and trying to create, you know, signage directions to some of the attractions along the way. You know, some of the things I mentioned earlier, the schools, the museums, different attractions. And then Sports Backers has a vision plan for Fall Line. And again, they had a consultant, Tool Design is who they're working with. They had some charrettes in early May. I actually participated with them. A few of us in the room had been to different charrettes that they held. But really, again, trying to, how do we enhance the route? So it's not just, well, here's this asphalt, go ride and walk along that corridor. It's what are you doing as you go along that route? And one effort, we're trying to make little parklets, places to rest. As we mentioned, how do you go to the restroom? Where do you park along the way? Some of the efforts, and Barbara Jaycox is here with me. We've been working on the Ashland Trolley Line corridor. And really, before Fall Line existed, we were talking about the trolley line. How do we get from Laurel and Broad Streets, the original Ashland Trolley Line depot, out to Ashland itself? That's about a 14 plus mile corridor, mostly still intact, developed along Brook Road. And then as you get up to Lakeside Avenue, I'm trying to zoom out just a little bit so you can see that straight line that kind of runs from the city up to Ashland. That's more or less that same corridor for the trolley line. So sports backers got involved and said, hey, let's talk about an entire corridor between Ashland and Petersburg. But that original section for trolley line, we are trying to interpret the history along that corridor. And we've been working with Henrico, Hanover, and Ashland, now also with the city and Valentine Museum, trying to kind of bring back the memory of the trolley line, that time before we had cars everywhere. A lot of the development in that corridor was along the trolley line because that was the transportation route. You used the trolley, or you had a horse and a buggy. And Brook Road itself was kind of the main road between Richmond and Washington, D.C., Northern Virginia. So again, trying to tell some of that history along there so that you're not just riding, or it's not just something for somebody who's, trying to ride real fast through there, but it's a destination for people who might want to study that history, kind of envision what what life was like in the early 1900s with that corridor. It's mostly power line still, because the power company ran their lines through there. And so, how did the communities along that route develop as well? And there's Barbara and I have had a lot of fun really trying to interact with people, historians through that corridor, people with old photos. We've been trying to get people who may remember riding on the trolley or had a relative that had ridden on it. So it's an interesting project that we've been working on, but it's really part of that enhancement of the corridor. As Kat has talked a lot about, Capitol Trail is a great, place to ride and all those, but it's really, there's a lot of opportunities through that corridor. Everybody knows about the plantations, along historic Route 5. A lot of the history with Jamestown itself. There's a lot of different ways to enjoy the corridor besides just the ride or the walk. So that's really, we're trying to do all those things for Fall Line instead of playing catch up with it. So I have lots of things I could say about Fall Line, but if y'all would like to talk.
And the design build for the Hanover and Henrico section has started. VDOT is administering that for the northern end to connect to the Ashland trolley line. So that's leading the way. And then Henrico segments are all under design. We have 7.5 miles. We're hoping to break ground on the Park Street phase closer to the city of Richmond this year. And we just had a public meeting, like I mentioned in the beginning, May 16th at Lewis Ginter. It received a lot of positive feedback. We had about 82 people in attendance for our Henrico Southern segment. And like I said, comments closed today. So you're welcome to go on our webpage, and we have a Survey Monkey link and provide comments. Yeah, and the feedback was, very good at our meeting. At some times along the Fall Line and in our initial meetings, some people were concerned about their backyards and safety. And so there were some studies that sports backers shared with us. So that's helpful data to share with folks.
I was going to say in Colonial Heights, the story was, well, hey, this trail, this rail line corridor has been there for a long time. I use it to walk. when you put all these people out there, I might want to have a fence, right? And then, of course, the joke with this kind of trail development always is they come right back and say, I want that gate so they can get out on the trail.
Yes, it
So,
happens.
we're
Yeah, the gate comes, yep.
yeah, yeah. It's a community building effort. I think, I was a reporter during the time that the Capitol Trail was under development, and a lot of those meetings, folks were talking about how do I, people. I don't want people coming to my house and stealing something and
They're
getting
gonna
away
steal
on the
my
trail.
TV. And I'm like, I want to watch.
It's
Like,
just-
let's see that TV on that bike.
Just-
There has been no crime on the Capitol Trail. Very, very little to none. We've had a little bit of trailhead break-ins that happen once in a while, but if you go hiking, that happens anywhere. Just want to reiterate, there has not been an increase of crime due to a trail coming on. So just wanted to say that out loud.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I say that Colonial Heights, that's just one example that comes from some of the public meetings and so on, questions that people get asked. But yeah, those are almost always right after the trail opens, folks who definitely want to get out there. Give me that gate now and let me get on the trail and connect with my neighbors that way.
But there's already a road going to your house. You need to have a gate there too, so just think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I know Kat, folks in Charles City County who weren't really sure that they wanted to have the trail running in their yards.
They call it the Golden Road now because it brings in, tourists and all of that. And so, but before that, there was a lot of naysayers, but now they love the bike trail.
And they use
So,
it too.
Yeah.
It's not just the people who
Yeah.
come, it's that they themselves take
Exactly.
advantage of it.
And they're activating the trail with new restaurants. There's an event venue coming in Charles City County. There's other economic development that's coming to Charles City County because of the trail. And everyone is overall very positive about the CAP Trail. And that should be similar for the fall line as well. That is my expectation.
I was going to say, we have final thoughts. You got any other questions?
Yay, trails. I had to say it once.
Well, and
I want to say one thing.
Yeah.
It's going to be very important that the fall line connects seamlessly to the Capitol Trail. That is very, very crucial. I'm using this as a platform for advocacy. So if it's not seamless, people on the Capitol Trail won't go to the fall line, and fall line people won't come to the Capitol Trail. And specifically the Capitol Trail, we have people from Norfolk. We've got a lot of people who bike from this region that'll bike from that area to Richmond, Ashland, Petersburg. So
Spend the night.
Spend the
some money.
night is very important. I also want to mention, there's a couple jurisdictions that are not on the trail that are part of Plan RVA. So New Kent, Goochland, the economic impact will ripple. So for example, in Charles City County, many people stay in Hopewell and New Kent when they go use the trail. Or they'll stay in York County because that's where mom and dad is. It will ripple affect the economic impact. This is not just the Ashland to Petersburg Trail where only the economic impact is going to be there. So I just want to make sure that's very clear that the whole region is going to be impacted in a positive way.
And now that we've got this north-south momentum, we need to start thinking east-west.
East-west to Charlottesville. I have lots of dreams. To Charlottesville, to the beach, to DC. So when I'm old, I'd like to be able to do those things.
yes, Kat, you could talk more about it, but the boat,
Birthplace of America Trail, going east to Hampton Roads.
right? So essentially coming from the peninsula all the way up to Stanton, eventually. The three-notched is the
To Charlottesville.
proposal between, that's actually, there's a study right now, Charlottesville, through Afton Mountain and on to Waynesboro, and Stanton eventually. But how do we connect from Richmond to Charlottesville? Three-Notch Trail is the working name. It's the old Three-Notch Trail, which is basically US 250 between Richmond and Charlottesville. But we'll eventually get to talking about that west, to make the east part, with Capitol Trail work. And as Kat said, we threw different names around at different times. What was it? The beach to the Blue Ridge.
Yeah, lots of good ones. So fall line's a great one though at the end. So
Yeah.
but yeah, this will make a huge impact. So get ready is what I'm saying. Get ready.
Yeah, and again, with our bike ped plan, that was a big emphasis of that spine network, the center, running between Ashland down to Petersburg. That's that north-south, and then the east-west. We've got the Capitol Trail in hand, but how do we continue west? Is that in Chesterfield along you know, like Robius already exists with bike lanes. Do we keep going that way into Powhatan? Do we go out Henrico into Goochland that way? Is it something where we go north from Hanover and then through to, you know, Louisa for, you know, connections for Three Notched?
Yeah.
So, but those are very far down the road. I was gonna say, you know, Wood, you haven't been in office long enough to try to
Get it
get too
done.
knee deep
Get
in
it
that,
done.
but.
Yeah.
It's, yeah, not far down the road. You got to
Yeah.
start now.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
Well, any last questions from the audience before we wrap this up? I think we're getting pretty close on time here.
Just a quick question about funding. Is it all public funding, or is there a mix of public-private funding in all of these types of projects, the trails?
The question is about funding, and that's always a very fantastic, fun topic. Like I said, Barbara and Sharon are both on our technical advisory committee. You're both very familiar with applying for, you know, funding, federal funding, and so on.
I can
So-
speak for, sorry.
No, go ahead.
For the Fall Line Trail, Henrico segments, like one is state revenue share funding, we applied for a grant. Some other portions are transportation alternative, which is a federal grant we applied for, which has match money. Of course, we didn't get enough funding to build the trail, so the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, the regional funds have helped, since it's a regional trail, have helped, you know, some of the, cover the difference. And then there was some other federal HIP funding, highway infrastructure program, and then there's other federal funding that has come available. So not really private funding, all federal, state, and regional and local funding.
Yeah, we've been getting some trail built with development. So we do take advantage of every opportunity to, as new properties develop, to get them to build trails. But primarily state, federal, and then through the CVTA. And we do have some local money in Chesterfield set aside specifically for little community connectivity projects. And it's little sidewalk projects where it's a little short thing to connect a cul-de-sac to a cul-de-sac.
Yes, I love that. Like I was saying, as a cyclist, trying to make sure that you avoid some of the bigger intersections. How do you connect through neighborhood byways? And yes, when we were doing the bike ped plan, we talked a lot about this one in Chesterfield that we were very fond of, but really, you know, those little, you know, very short segments end up being a really big deal for pedestrians and cyclists. They aren't super expensive, but they're not, you know, free. So, but it's very appreciated that you took that on, you're taking that on. Henrico, I know you all have been trying to retrofit some of those as well, but it's you know, all of those efforts, you know, cost a little bit of money, but it's back to what Kat was saying, is that advocate side of keep asking for those things, you know,
Yeah.
keep you know, trying to make sure the locality knows this is an important thing for you.
And then as a nonprofit, we're privately funded. So as in, you know, if you'd like to make a donation, virginiacapitaltrail.org. So I mean, we do events, we do individual donations, we do grants. So, and a lot of that money goes to advocacy, building infrastructure along the Capitol Trail, activating the Capitol Trail in a lot of different ways. So, and I think it's really important to have that public-private arm. So with such a big project.
And I just wanted to clarify, there are some private developments that are not county, county is not administering the projects, like River Mill, they put in the
Right.
shared use
Yeah.
path, and like Leasefield Farm Drive, the developer put in the shared use path, so,
Which does connect to another trail.
yes, which does connect.
You know, we're starting to slowly connect
There you go,
things.
good job.
Starting to network. When I started my job, I have to say, you know, Capitol Trail had been put in. Henrico counted 15 miles of that. There was the Gayton Road mile or so, and then not a lot else. And it's grown tremendously since then. You know, go build stuff was
Yes.
what Sharon's staff was told. You know, they're unleashed. Go ahead and start building some of these connections. And so again, filling in the gaps and making sure that, you know, they're studying them. They're trying to figure out, like, prioritize which ones are the most important. But yeah, it's night and day from when I first got this job in 2016. So very happy to.
Henrico and Chesterfield are doing wonderful work. They really are.
Oh,
So
thanks.
they really are. So it's wonderful to see all the sidewalks, trail work, and there's still a lot to get done. I mean, there is still a lot to get done. I would totally agree, but it's come a long way. So
And I think with that, let's give the panelists a round of applause and thanks everybody for your participation.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, we've got a break for a little while here. At 3:30 is the Art and Placemaking, How Creativity Can Nurture Inclusivity.